Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world of marble columns, gladiatorial blood, and questionable plumbing. We're diving deep into what life was really like in the Roman Empire. Forget the Hollywood epics with their gleaming armor and heroic senators. The truth, you probably wouldn't survive a single day. So before we begin this journey through ancient Rome, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy the content I create here. And please, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see this global community coming together to explore history. Now, get comfortable. Maybe dim those lights. Turn on a fan for that gentle background noise, and let's ease into tonight's journey together through the streets, the homes, and the harsh realities of ancient Rome. Congratulations, you've just woken up in Rome circa 150 AD during the height of the empire under Emperor Antoninus Pius. The good news, you're alive in one of history's greatest civilizations. The bad news, everything else. Your eyes flutter open, and immediately you're hit with the reality of Roman domestic life. If you're lucky enough to be in the middle class, you're waking up in an insula, a multi-story apartment building that makes modern tenement housing look like the Ritz. These structures are architectural nightmares, built cheap and tall, sometimes reaching 6 or 7 stories high with wooden beams that creak ominously with every gust of wind. Your room, if you can call it that, is tiny, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, shared with your entire family. There's no bedroom, no living room, no kitchen to speak of. Just one multipurpose space where you eat, sleep, work, and try to maintain some shred of dignity. The walls are thin, so thin you can hear your neighbor Marcus arguing with his wife about the fish sauce bill. And on the other side, that couple whose nocturnal activities require no imagination to visualize. Privacy is a luxury reserved for the very wealthy, and you are decidedly not wealthy. Your bed is a simple wooden frame, maybe with some rope lattice work if you're fortunate, topped with a straw-filled mattress that's seen better days. Better days meaning about 3 years ago before the bedbugs moved in and made it their permanent residence. There's no pillow as you know it, just a small wooden headrest or perhaps a bundle of cloth that's somehow less comfortable than sleeping directly on the wood. A thin woolen blanket that scratches like sandpaper covers you, and it hasn't been washed in months because, well, washing isn't exactly convenient when you have to haul water up 5 flights of stairs. The room smells like a combination of human sweat, cooking oil that's gone rancid, smoke from the oil lamp that burned late into the night, and something indefinable but distinctly biological wafting up from the street below. There are no windows with glass, just wooden shutters that you keep closed at night because Rome's streets after dark are about as safe as walking through a lion's den wearing a meat suit. When you do open them, you're greeted with a view of another insula about 3 feet away, close enough to shake hands with your neighbor if either of you were so inclined. The floor beneath your feet is cold, hard-packed earth or cheap concrete if the landlord was feeling generous. No rugs, no heating, no insulation. In winter, you freeze. In summer, you bake. The building's top floors where the poor live are essentially ovens, the heat rising from below combined with the Mediterranean sun turning your tiny room into a clay kiln. And in winter, that same room becomes an icebox because Roman heating solutions, the hypo-cost system, are only for ground floor rooms and the wealthy who can afford them. You try to sit up, and your back immediately protests. You're in your late 20s, but your body feels 50. The combination of sleeping on a terrible mattress, the physical labor you do daily, and the general wear and tear of Roman life has taken its toll. Your joints crack like dried twigs being snapped. As you swing your legs over the side of the bed, you have to be careful. The floor is littered with things: a clay pot for water, some tools of your trade, maybe some stale bread from yesterday, and importantly, the chamber pot. That's right. There's no bathroom in your apartment. No toilet, no running water, just a large clay pot that serves as the family's nighttime lavatory. Speaking of which, nature is calling, and it's not a gentle suggestion. The chamber pot from last night is nearly full, and you know what that means. Later, you'll have to carry it downstairs and dump it into the nearest public sewer outlet, or if you're particularly lazy and morally flexible, out the window into the street below. Yes, that was an actual thing. The streets of Rome were essentially open sewage channels disguised as thoroughfares, and pedestrians learned quickly to walk close to the buildings and listen for the warning shout of "aqua," which roughly translated means "heads up, poop incoming." But we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, you're just trying to fully wake up, which is difficult because dawn broke maybe an hour ago, and the sounds of Rome are already in full swing. Vendors are shouting about their fresh fish, though fresh is a generous term when it's been sitting in the sun since yesterday. Carts are rumbling over the cobblestones, despite being technically illegal during daylight hours. The law says they can only operate at night to reduce congestion, which means Romans trying to sleep are serenaded by the sound of wooden wheels on stone for hours on end. Children are screaming, dogs are barking, and somewhere nearby, someone is hammering metal, probably a blacksmith who started work before sunrise to avoid the worst of the heat. Your family is starting to stir around you. Your wife is already up. She's always up first, trying to get the small brazier lit to heat some water. Your children, 2 of them who survived past infancy, a statistical blessing in a world where half of all children die before age 10, are still curled up in the corner on their own straw mats. They'll wake soon, hungry and cranky, demanding food you're not entirely sure you can provide today. The money from your last job at the construction site ran out 2 days ago, and work has been scarce. You glance around your humble dwelling and take stock of your possessions. They're few. A couple of clay pots for storing grain and oil, a small iron knife, some wooden bowls and spoons, a single oil lamp that provides your only light after sunset, a few tunics hanging from pegs on the wall, each one as threadbare as the last. No artwork adorns the walls, no decorative items, no family heirlooms. Everything you own has a purpose, and if it doesn't, you've already sold it or traded it for food. The reality of waking up in ancient Rome is this: you're not a senator in a toga debating philosophy in the Forum. You're not a wealthy merchant with a villa and slaves to attend to your every need. You're not even a soldier with steady pay and meals provided. You're just another face in a city of over 1 million people, all of them trying to survive, all of them competing for the same limited resources, all of them one bad day away from complete destitution. And your day hasn't even really started yet. So you've managed to drag yourself out of bed, and now comes the fun part: getting clean. Except in Rome, clean is a very relative term. Let's start with the basics. Brushing your teeth. You don't have a toothbrush made of plastic bristles. You have your finger, maybe wrapped in a piece of rough cloth if you're feeling fancy. And toothpaste. Well, that's where it gets interesting in a deeply disturbing way. Romans had several options for oral hygiene, none of them pleasant by modern standards. The most common tooth-cleaning substance was a powder made from crushed bones, oyster shells, and sometimes pumice stone. Yes, pumice stone, the same volcanic rock you use to scrub dead skin off your feet. Romans ground it up and rubbed it on their teeth. If that sounds abrasive, that's because it was. It scraped away plaque but also tooth enamel, leading to sensitive teeth and increased decay over time. But wait, it gets worse. Another popular ingredient in Roman tooth powder was urine. Specifically, human urine imported from Portugal, because apparently Portuguese urine was considered particularly effective. The ammonia in the urine acted as a whitening agent and disinfectant. So congratulations, you're starting your day by rubbing fermented Portuguese pee on your teeth. The Romans called this substance urina puri if it came from young boys, as it was thought to be more potent. Try not to think about the logistics of that collection process. You rinse your mouth with water from a clay jug, careful not to swallow because that water came from the communal fountain down the street, and you have no idea what's really in it. The aqueducts that feed Rome are engineering marvels, true, bringing fresh water from springs miles away. But by the time that water reaches your neighborhood, it's passed through lead pipes, sat in holding tanks where pigeons bathe, and been touched by hundreds of hands. You spit the water out the window, adding to the already questionable fluid composition of the street below. Now let's talk about the rest of your body. Bathing, in the Roman sense, doesn't happen at home unless you're wealthy enough to have a private bath, which you absolutely are not. Your apartment has no plumbing whatsoever. No pipes, no drains, no running water of any kind. Every drop of water you use has to be carried up those stairs in clay pots, so you use it sparingly. Today, like most days, you settle for what Romans called a bird bath, using a small basin of water and a cloth to wipe down the essentials: face, armpits, groin, feet. You try to do this discreetly in the corner of your room, but again, privacy is a myth, and your family has seen it all before anyway. The soap you use, if you can call it that, is more like a paste made from animal fat and wood ash. It's called sapo, and it's caustic enough that prolonged use can actually damage your skin. It doesn't really lather or smell particularly good. In fact, it smells like what it is, rendered animal fat with chemicals. But it does cut through the grime and the accumulated sweat from yesterday's labor, so you scrub it over your skin and rinse it off with more of your precious water supply. Your hair is another challenge. Washing it properly would require more water than you can reasonably spare, so mostly you just run your wet hands through it and hope for the best. Romans of means use olive oil to condition their hair, but olive oil is expensive and you need it for cooking, so your hair remains coarse, often dusty and probably home to a few unwanted guests. Lice are just a fact of life. Everyone has them, from the poorest beggar to the emperor himself, though the emperors are probably better fed. Deodorant doesn't exist. Romans mask body odor with perfumes if they can afford them, but you can't, so you smell like human. Just human, with notes of yesterday's sweat, smoke from the cooking fire, and whatever your job involves. If you work in the tannery, you smell like urine and animal hides. If you work at the fulling station, washing clothes for the wealthy, you also smell like urine because that's what they use to clean fabrics. If you're a laborer, you smell like honest sweat and dirt. Everyone just accepts it because everyone smells like something. Now, you need to address your clothing situation. You own 2 tunics, maybe 3 if you've been particularly thrifty. They're simple garments, basically large T-shaped pieces of wool or linen stitched at the sides, reaching roughly to your knees. No underwear as we understand it, though you might have a loincloth called a subligaculum if you're modest, or if your work requires extra protection. You pull on the cleanest of your tunics, which is to say the one that's been worn the fewest consecutive days since its last washing. It's scratchy, it's stained, and there's a hole near the hem that you keep meaning to repair but never get around to. If it's cold, you add a cloak, A heavy wool rectangle that you drape over one shoulder and pin with a bronze fibula. If it's summer, which in Rome means oppressively hot, you wear as little as possible and still sweat through everything. Fashion isn't a concern for you. Togas are for citizens with status, conducting official business. You're just trying to get through the day without your clothes falling apart. Shoes are another expense you try to avoid when possible. If you have them, they're simple sandals made from leather straps and a sole, maybe with some iron hobnails on the bottom if you walk a lot. But leather is expensive, and your sandals have been repaired so many times they're more repair than original sandal. Many Romans in your economic bracket just go barefoot and develop thick, calloused soles that can handle the hot pavement and the occasional sharp stone. The streets are filthy anyway, covered in animal dung, food waste, and those liquids we discussed earlier. So shoes provide only minimal protection from the biological hazard that is urban Rome. Now that you're dressed and vaguely clean, your stomach reminds you that you haven't eaten since yesterday's meager dinner. Breakfast in Rome is not the hearty meal you might imagine. There's no bacon and eggs, no pancakes, no fresh orange juice. If you're poor or working class, breakfast is usually just a piece of bread, maybe dipped in water or wine to soften it because it's probably a day or two old and hard as a rock. This bread isn't the soft, fluffy loaf you're imagining. It's dense, coarse, made from barley or wheat flour that hasn't been finely milled, full of grit and sometimes small stones that weren't fully separated from the grain. Biting into it wrong can crack a tooth, which is a disaster in a world without dentists, only barbers with pliers and a willingness to yank. If you're fortunate, you might have a small piece of cheese, hard and salty, made from goat's or sheep's milk. It's been sitting in brine for weeks to preserve it, and it tastes aggressively of salt and funk. Or perhaps some olives, the cheapest food available in the Mediterranean, so cheap that they're basically poverty rations. You eat them whole, pit and all, because who has time for delicate eating when you need to get to work? There's no coffee, no tea, nothing caffeinated to shock your system awake. Romans drink water if they trust it, or more commonly, pasca, a mixture of water and sour wine that's so acidic it could probably strip paint, but at least kills most of the bacteria lurking in your cup. It's the Roman energy drink, and it tastes about as good as it sounds. You down a cup of it, feel your mouth pucker, and consider yourself fortified for the day ahead. Your wife has managed to warm some water over the small charcoal brazier, one of the most dangerous items in your home because apartment fires are terrifyingly common in Rome. These buildings are basically kindling waiting for a spark, wooden structures packed tight with people all using open flames for light, heat, and cooking. Multiple times a year, entire blocks burn down, and the city's fire brigade, the vigiles, can rarely do more than watch and try to prevent the spread. But you need the heat, so you risk it, carefully tending the coals while your wife prepares a thin gruel for the children, mixing some grain with water and a tiny bit of oil if there's any left. You eat standing up, quickly, mechanically. There's no dining table, no chairs, no leisurely family breakfast. You're burning daylight, and daylight is when work happens, when money can be made, when you can hopefully earn enough to buy food for tomorrow. The children are crying, hungry for more than the watery gruel can satisfy, but there is no more. Not until you work, not until you earn. Your wife gives you a look that's part concern, part resignation. She knows the math as well as you do. The rent on this tiny room is due in 3 days, and you're short. Very short. So you finish your bread, wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, and prepare to face ancient Rome in all its chaotic, crowded, sometimes violent glory. But first, you need to navigate the most dangerous part of your morning routine, the stairs. The stairs in your insula are a death trap, steep, narrow, and often partially rotted. There's no banister, no lighting, just worn wooden steps that creak ominously with each footfall. People have died on these stairs, slipped and fallen, tumbled down and broken their necks, or simply stepped through a weak plank and plunged into the darkness below. You take each step carefully, hugging the wall, feeling your way down through the gloom. The stairwell smells even worse than your room, a concentrated essence of all the human activity happening in this vertical slum. Cooking smells, body odor, waste, mold, and occasionally the sweet, sickly smell of something dead, maybe a rat, maybe something worse. As you descend, you pass your neighbor's doors, thin wooden barriers that do nothing to contain sound. You hear everything, arguments, crying babies, the rhythmic sounds of couples, someone coughing so violently it sounds like they're trying to expel a lung, and they might be. Tuberculosis is rampant in these crowded buildings, along with a host of other respiratory ailments caused by smoke inhalation, mold, and the general lack of ventilation. You try not to breathe too deeply as you pass the door where old Gaius lives, or lived. You haven't seen him in days, and that smell suggests you won't be seeing him again. Finally, you reach the ground floor and push through the door into the street, and immediately you're assaulted by the sensory overload that is Rome at dawn. The noise hits you first, a wall of sound so intense it's almost physical. Vendors are already shouting their wares, each one trying to out-yell the others. Fresh fish, except it's not fresh. It's been dead for at least a day and is quickly approaching its expiration date in the Mediterranean heat. Hot bread from the bakery down the street, one of the few establishments allowed to operate with ovens due to fire regulations, meaning they have a captive market and charge accordingly. Vegetables that look like they've seen better days, and honestly, so have you. The street itself is narrow, barely wide enough for 2 carts to pass. Not that carts are legally allowed during the day, but laws in Rome are more like suggestions if you know the right people or can afford the right bribes. The ground beneath your feet is a treacherous combination of cobblestones, dirt, and various liquids you choose not to identify. The Romans did build sewers, the Cloaca Maxima being the most famous, but they don't extend to every street. And even where they do, they're open channels that occasionally overflow, especially after heavy rain. The result is that Roman streets are basically rivers of filth, with stepping stones placed at intervals so pedestrians can cross without wading through ankle-deep sewage. You navigate this carefully, watching both where you step and what's happening above. Because remember that thing about Romans throwing waste out of windows. It's not just a morning activity. It can happen anytime, and the only warning you might get is a shouted "Aqua," which gives you maybe 2 seconds to dodge. Occasionally, someone doesn't even bother with the warning. There are actually laws on the books about this, stating that if someone dumps waste on a passerby from a window, they're liable for damages, but good luck proving which window it came from in a 6-story building full of potential suspects. The buildings loom over you on both sides, blocking out much of the morning sun, which is actually a blessing because when the sun is high, these narrow streets become ovens, the stone and brick soaking up heat and radiating it back at you from all angles. But for now, in the relative cool of morning, the shade is welcome. You pass a thermopolium, a fast food establishment, basically a bar with a counter and large clay vessels sunk into it, containing various prepared foods and drinks. The smell is enticing. Hot food, wine, the particular aroma of garum, that fermented fish sauce Romans put on everything. Your stomach growls, but you can't afford to eat out. That's for people with steady incomes and financial security, neither of which describes you. A few doors down, the public latrine is already busy. This is one of the more surreal aspects of Roman life to modern sensibilities. Public toilets are exactly that, public. A room with stone benches lining the walls, holes cut at regular intervals, and a channel of running water beneath to carry waste away, theoretically. There's no privacy, no stalls, no doors. You sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers, conducting your business while chatting about the weather, politics, or the latest gossip from the forum. It's a social space. Some people conduct business here, make deals, arrange meetings. There's even a slave whose job is to offer you a sponge on a stick, the Roman version of toilet paper, which you dip in the channel of running water, use, rinse, and leave for the next person. If that doesn't make you appreciate modern plumbing, nothing will. You keep walking, heading toward the construction site where you hope there's work today. The streets are filling up now, a chaotic press of humanity going about their daily survival. Slaves carrying amphorae of wine or oil stacked precariously on their shoulders. Wealthy merchants being carried in litters by teams of slaves, curtained off from the masses they consider beneath them. Professional beggars, some with real disabilities, some with theatrical ones, calling out for coins. Street performers, musicians with battered lyres, snake charmers, fortune tellers promising to read your future for a few copper coins. A future they'll tell you is bright regardless of the actual signs, because nobody pays to hear they're going to die poor. You pass a group of soldiers, legionaries from one of the urban cohorts responsible for keeping order in the city, and you give them a wide berth. Soldiers in Rome are a complicated presence. They're supposed to protect you, maintain peace, but they're also not above shaking down civilians for bribes or roughing people up if they feel disrespected. And disrespect can mean anything from actual insults to just being in the wrong place with the wrong face. You keep your head down, your posture non-threatening, and keep moving. The Forum is ahead, the political and commercial heart of Rome, but you're not going there. That's for citizens with business, lawsuits to file, politicians to petition, or legitimate commerce to conduct. You're heading to the outskirts, where a new temple is being built for some god or goddess. You don't really keep track anymore. The gods haven't done much for you lately, but you say the prayers anyway, just in case. Romans are hedgers when it comes to religion. Better to honor all the gods than risk offending one and having them curse you with even worse luck than you already have. You arrive at the construction site as the sun is properly up now, and already it's getting hot. The foreman, a thick-necked brute named Lucius who got his position through family connections rather than competence, is standing by the entrance, eyeing the gathered workers with the expression of a man selecting cattle at market. There are more men here than there are positions available, a common problem in Rome where the population vastly exceeds the available work. Lucius points at some men, waves others away. You hold your breath, hoping, praying to any god that might be listening. He looks at you, hesitates, and then nods. You're in. Relief floods through you. Today, you eat. The work is backbreaking, literally. You're hauling stones, mixing mortar, carrying water, doing whatever the skilled workers, the actual masons and carpenters, need done. It's the kind of labor that grinds men down, that takes young bodies and ages them prematurely. Your hands are already calloused, but new blisters form anyway, breaking and bleeding and then hardening into new calluses. Your back screams with each load. Your legs tremble by midday, but you don't stop. You can't stop. Stopping means being replaced by one of the dozens of desperate men still gathered outside, hoping someone inside collapses or gets injured so they can take his place. And injuries happen. All the time. A rope breaks and a stone falls, crushing a man's foot. He screams and he's dragged away, and someone else is immediately pulled in to replace him. No compensation, no medical care beyond maybe having the foot amputated by a barber surgeon if infection sets in, which it probably will. The mentality is simple. Workers are expendable. Rome has an endless supply of poor, desperate men willing to risk their lives for a day's wages. You are a tool, a beast of burden, and when you break, you'll be discarded just as easily. As dusk settles over Rome, the city transforms. The relative safety of daylight, and it was only relative, gives way to something more sinister. The streets that were merely dangerous in the day become genuinely life-threatening at night. First, there's the lighting situation, or rather, the complete lack of it. There are no streetlights, no public illumination system. Once the sun goes down, the streets plunge into near total darkness, broken only by the occasional oil lamp someone has hung outside their shop or home, which provides about as much light as a modern candle, meaning almost none. You navigate by memory, by feel, and by luck. The darkness brings out Rome's criminal element in force. Muggers, thieves, gangs of young men looking for entertainment, which often means violence. There are stories, common enough to be believed, of people being stabbed for their shoes, beaten for the few coins in their purse, or simply assaulted for fun by bored aristocratic youths out slumming. The vigiles, Rome's combination fire brigade and night watch, are spread thin across a city of over 1 million people. Your chances of them arriving in time to help you are approximately 0. So you walk quickly, keeping to the middle of the street where you're less likely to be grabbed from a doorway, but not so boldly that you attract attention. It's a delicate balance between appearing confident enough not to be an easy target, but not so confident that you're seen as a challenge. The other major nighttime hazard is the chamber pot situation we discussed earlier. It doesn't stop at night, in fact, it intensifies. People are less likely to carry their waste down in the dark, so they simply open their shutters and dump. The aqua warning system is less reliable at night because people figure if you're out after dark, whatever happens to you is basically your own fault. You've learned to listen for the sound of shutters opening, to watch for movement in the windows above, and to be ready to dodge at a moment's notice. You make it home without incident, which is a small victory in itself, and climb those treacherous stairs one more time. Your family is there, waiting, and the relief on your wife's face when she sees you, alive and with coins, is palpable. Too many men don't come home, whether they've been injured at work, robbed on the streets, pressed into service for some military campaign, or simply decided their family was too much burden and walked away to start fresh somewhere else. You hand over most of your wages, keeping only a tiny bit back for tomorrow's necessities, and your wife immediately begins planning how to stretch these few coins into enough food for several days. Dinner is the main meal in Rome, though calling it that might be generous. Your wife has been to the market, or more likely, the end-of-day market where desperate vendors sell their unsold goods at reduced prices before they spoil completely. She's managed to get some grain, which she's been soaking and will now cook into a kind of porridge or gruel, thicker than breakfast's version, but not by much. If you're lucky, there might be some vegetables to throw in, onions, garlic, some sad-looking cabbage. Maybe, if it's a good day, a tiny bit of salted fish, so small and so salty it's more flavoring than protein, but it's something. The cooking happens over that same dangerous charcoal brazier, the one that could set the entire building ablaze with one errant ember. Your wife tends it carefully, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon worn smooth from years of use. The children are wild with hunger, having subsisted all day on practically nothing, and they crowd around the pot like little birds waiting for a worm. You try to maintain some order, but hunger makes everyone irritable, including you. So instead of seeking medical help you can't afford and probably wouldn't help anyway, you do what most Romans do. You wash the wound with your limited water supply. Maybe press some garlic on it, because garlic has a reputation for healing properties. Not entirely unfounded, and you hope. You hope your body fights it off. You hope it doesn't turn septic. You hope you don't develop a fever that leaves you unable to work, because unable to work means no income, and no income means starvation, eviction, and death, possibly in that order. As you're tending to your wound, your wife mentions that little Marcus, your younger son, has been coughing all day. Not just a little cough, but a deep, wet cough that rattles in his chest. Your heart sinks. Respiratory illnesses are among the most common killers of children in Rome. The combination of crowded living conditions, smoke inhalation from the constant indoor fires, malnutrition, and general poor air quality creates a perfect environment for diseases like pneumonia, tuberculosis, and bronchitis. You go to your son, place a hand on his forehead, and feel the heat of fever. He's burning up, his small body fighting something it may not be strong enough to overcome. There's nothing you can do, not really. You could take him to the temple, make an offering to Asclepius, the god of healing, but offerings require money you don't have. You could take him to a physician who might prescribe bed rest and fluids, things you're already doing, or who might try some treatment that could make things worse. So you do what parents have done throughout history when faced with childhood illness and no resources. You comfort him. You give him water, you keep him warm, and you pray. You pray to all the gods, major and minor, promising offerings you can't afford, making bargains you can't keep, begging for mercy from powers that have shown precious little interest in your family's welfare so far. The night wears on. The city outside is never truly quiet. Rome doesn't sleep so much as it shifts, the sounds of day replaced by the sounds of night. Cart wheels on stone as delivery vehicles make their rounds, legally allowed now that it's dark. Distant shouts, laughter, screams, you can't always tell which is which, dogs barking, babies crying in other apartments, the creak and groan of the building settling. And always, always the smell. Smoke, humanity, waste, cooking, all of it concentrated in these close quarters. You try to sleep, but it's difficult. Your body aches from the day's labor. Your hands throb from the blisters and that worrying infection. Your mind races with anxiety about money, about your son's illness, about tomorrow's uncertainties. Will there be work? Will Marcus get better or worse? Will the landlord give you more time on the rent? Or will you find yourselves evicted, joining the thousands of homeless who sleep in the streets, in the porticos of public buildings, anywhere they can find shelter? These thoughts chase each other in circles until finally exhaustion wins, and you drift into an uneasy sleep. But sleep in Rome is never restful, not for people like you. You dream of impossible things, a full stomach, a day without pain, a home with more than one room. You dream of your children growing up, healthy and strong, maybe learning a trade, maybe escaping the cycle of poverty that has trapped you. But these are just dreams, and in Rome, dreams are luxuries poor people can't afford. Reality always intrudes, whether it's the crying of your feverish son, the sounds of a fight in the street below, or simply the discomfort of your straw mattress that feels like it's made of rocks by this point in the night. And even as you sleep, Rome continues around you, this massive, chaotic, magnificent, terrible city. Over 1 million people, all struggling in their own ways. The wealthy in their villas worry about politics and social standing. The merchants worry about profits and competition. The slaves worry about survival and maybe freedom someday. And people like you, the working poor, the vast majority of Rome's population, you worry about everything all the time because your life is a constant negotiation with disaster. One illness, one injury, one run of bad luck, and you could lose everything, which isn't much to begin with, but it's all you have. As the night reaches its darkest point, just before dawn would begin to think about arriving, Rome is at its most dangerous and most vulnerable. Fires start easily in these wooden buildings, packed with people using open flames. Disease spreads through the cramped quarters. Violence erupts for reasons both significant and petty. And through it all, the city endures as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries more, built on the backs of people like you, people whose names won't be remembered, whose stories won't be told, but whose labor, suffering, and persistence made an empire possible. Let's talk about where you actually stand in Roman society, because understanding your place is crucial to understanding why survival is so difficult. Rome has a rigid social hierarchy, and you are very, very near the bottom. At the top are the senators, aristocratic families who have held power for generations, who own vast estates, command private armies of slaves, and play political games with empires at stake. Below them are the equestrians, the wealthy merchant class, people who have money but not the ancient bloodlines. Then come the plebeians, ordinary citizens, which technically includes you if you're lucky enough to have citizenship. But there's a vast range within this category, from relatively comfortable artisans and shopkeepers to the urban poor, which is where you firmly reside. And below you, the slaves, millions of them, making up perhaps 30 to 40% of Rome's population. These are people with no rights, no freedoms, people who can be bought, sold, beaten, killed at their master's whim. The only thing that separates you from slavery is your technical freedom, but it's a freedom so constrained by poverty that the distinction sometimes feels academic. A slave with a kind master, working in a wealthy household with regular meals and shelter, might actually have better material conditions than you with your freedom and your constant hunger. This hierarchy is enforced not just through law, but through every aspect of daily life. The way you dress. We talked about your simple tunic versus the togas of citizens conducting official business versus the elaborate stolas and palace of wealthy women. The way you speak. Educated Romans use refined Latin, quote Greek philosophy, while you speak the rough dialect of the streets. Where you sit at the theater or amphitheater, if you can afford to go at all. You're in the upper sections, the cheap seats, while the wealthy sit close to the action in cushioned comfort. Even where you can walk, certain areas are effectively restricted to people of means, guarded by social convention and sometimes actual guards. This system is designed to keep you in your place, and it's remarkably effective. Social mobility exists in Rome, technically, but it's rare. Most people die in the same class they were born into. You could become a successful merchant, but that requires capital you don't have. You could join the military, and if you survive 20 years of service, you'd retire with land and a pension, but military service itself is dangerous and demanding, and there's no guarantee you'd survive to enjoy those benefits. You could get lucky, catch the eye of a wealthy patron who elevates your status, but luck is not a strategy, and wealthy patrons are more interested in ambitious young men from respectable families than exhausted laborers with calloused hands. Now, if you think life is hard for you as a man, consider what it's like for women in Rome. Your wife faces all the same hardships you do: poverty, hunger, disease, dangerous living conditions, plus an entire additional layer of oppression based solely on her gender. Roman society is deeply patriarchal. Women are considered property, first of their fathers, then of their husbands. Your wife has no legal identity separate from you. She can't own property in her own name, can't enter into contracts, can't vote, obviously, and can't hold any political office. Her entire life has been circumscribed by expectations of domesticity and reproduction. She was probably married by age 14 or 15, possibly to you if you've been together that long, possibly to someone else first who died, leaving her a widow. Her primary value in society's eyes is her ability to produce legitimate heirs, specifically sons, because daughters are expensive burdens that require dowries to marry off. The fact that she's managed to keep 2 children alive past infancy is actually an achievement. Most women in her position will experience multiple pregnancies, and many of those will end in miscarriage, stillbirth, or infants who die within the first year. Childbirth itself is one of the most dangerous events in a Roman woman's life. There's no modern obstetrics, no understanding of hygiene, no antibiotics, no blood transfusions, no cesarean sections that the mother survives. If something goes wrong during labor, if the baby is breech, if there's hemorrhaging, if infection sets in afterward, the woman simply dies, and so probably does the baby. Maternal mortality rates are staggeringly high. Every pregnancy is a gamble with death, and women are expected to take that gamble repeatedly because large families are valued, even if most of the children won't survive to adulthood. But even beyond the physical dangers, there's the grinding reality of being a woman in poverty. Your wife's day is arguably harder than yours. While you were at the construction site, she was managing the household with no resources, trying to make nothing stretch into something. She has to fetch water, and we haven't really discussed this, but it involves walking to the nearest public fountain, waiting in line with dozens of other people, filling heavy clay vessels, and carrying them back up 5 flights of stairs. She has to shop for food with the minimal money available, haggling with vendors who see a desperate woman and price accordingly. She has to cook over that dangerous brazier, manage the children, keep them quiet so the neighbors don't complain, try to clean clothes without proper facilities, and do all of this while probably malnourished and exhausted. And if you die, if you're injured and can't work, if you simply abandon the family, her situation becomes desperate. A woman alone with children in Rome has almost no options. She could try to work, but women's labor is valued even less than men's and paid accordingly. She could remarry quickly, but who wants a woman with hungry children from a previous relationship? She could turn to prostitution, and many do. It's one of the few ways a woman without family support can earn money, but it's dangerous work, degrading, often controlled by pimps who take most of the earnings, and it carries massive social stigma. Or she could end up on the streets with her children, begging, and hope that someone shows mercy before they starve. The legal system offers her no protection. If you beat her, and Roman law gives you that right as her husband, she has no recourse. If you commit adultery, it's overlooked or even expected. Men will be men. If she commits adultery, even if it's rape, she's committed a crime that can be punished by death. The double standard is enshrined in law and reinforced by culture. She is, in almost every legal and social sense, your property, and the only thing that might give her any leverage is if she came from a family with resources, which she didn't, or if she's extraordinarily clever about managing household politics, which she might be, because intelligence is one thing poverty can't take from you. Let's talk about violence, because we've touched on it throughout, but it deserves its own focus. Rome is a violent place, and violence is so normalized that it's woven into entertainment. The gladiatorial games, for instance, aren't just sporting events. They're public executions, blood sport, murder for entertainment. Condemned criminals are sent into the arena to be torn apart by wild animals or to fight trained gladiators with no real chance of survival. Even the gladiators themselves, who are slightly better off than the condemned, live, brutal lives, training to kill and be killed, with the most successful ones achieving fame but always one bad day away from death in the sand. But the everyday violence is what gets you. The casual beatings, the drunken brawls that erupt in taverns and spill into the streets, the domestic violence that everyone hears through thin walls but no one intervenes in because it's considered private family business. The violence of poverty itself, the slow murder of malnutrition, the deaths from preventable diseases, the children who don't make it past their 5th birthday. Rome celebrates military conquest and the violence of the legions, and that same violence permeates civilian life. If you're assaulted on the street and you fight back, you could be arrested for disturbing the peace, especially if your attacker is wealthier or better connected than you. If you're injured at work, there's no compensation, no workers' rights, no safety regulations. You're just replaced. If you witness a crime and report it, you might become a target yourself, or you might be ignored because the victim and the perpetrator are both beneath the notice of anyone with power. Justice in Rome is not blind. It's very clear-sighted about status and wealth, and it consistently sides with those who have both against those who have neither. So here you are, at this moment in your day in ancient Rome, and you've survived so far. You've navigated the treacherous stairs of your insula, avoided being hit by falling chamber pot contents, earned enough money for another day of inadequate food, managed not to get robbed or beaten, and made it back home to your family. Your son is still feverish, your hands are still infected, your body is still damaged from years of hard labor and poor nutrition, but you're alive. The day isn't over yet, though, and there are still more realities of Roman life to face. Let's talk about one of Rome's most famous features, the baths, the thermae. You've heard about them, right? Those magnificent public bathing complexes with their heated pools, steam rooms, exercise yards, and libraries. They're often presented as evidence of Roman civilization and sophistication. And yes, they are impressive feats of engineering with their hypo-cost heating systems and aqueduct-fed water supplies. But experiencing them as a poor Roman is a very different thing from the luxurious spa day you might imagine. First, there's the entry fee. While some emperors occasionally sponsor free bath days to curry favor with the masses, usually you have to pay. And even though it's relatively cheap, designed to be accessible to common people, cheap is relative when you're living day to day. The fee is typically a quadrans, the smallest denomination of Roman currency, but that quadrans could also buy you a bit of food, and you're always making that calculation. Do you eat or do you bathe? Today, because you worked and earned, because you're covered in construction dust and dried sweat, and because your wife has been giving you meaningful looks about your smell, you decide to go to the baths. You arrive at the local thermae in your neighborhood, not the grand imperial baths like the baths of Caracalla or Diocletian. Those are magnificent complexes that could accommodate thousands, but your local facility, which is smaller, older, and significantly more decrepit. The entrance is crowded, as always. Baths are open from noon until dusk, and everyone comes after work, so it's packed with bodies, noise, and the particular humidity that comes from that many people in an enclosed space with hot water. You pay your quadrans to the attendant, who looks at you with the bored expression of someone who sees hundreds of unwashed Romans every day and is thoroughly unimpressed. Then you enter the apoditerium, the changing room where you're supposed to leave your clothes and belongings. This is where things get interesting. There's no security, No lockers with keys, just niches in the wall where you stuff your clothes and hope they're still there when you return. Theft is rampant. Professional bathhouse thieves work these places, grabbing tunics and sandals while their owners are soaking. You've learned to bring your absolute worst clothes to the baths for this reason, the ones you don't mind losing, and you try to hide your sandals under your tunic in the least obvious niche you can find. Now naked, because Romans bathe nude, you join the crowd moving through the bath complex. The first stop is typically the palaestra, an exercise yard where men and baths are segregated by gender or by time, with different hours for men and women. Engage in various athletic activities before bathing. Wrestling, ball games, lifting weights made of stone. The theory is that you work up a good sweat and then you're ready for the baths proper. But you're already exhausted from a full day of construction work, so you skip this. Let the young men and the wealthy who have time for leisure play their games. You're here to get clean and maybe relax for 5 minutes. The bathing sequence is a specific process. You start in the tepidarium, the warm room, which is heated but not intensely so. This is where you begin to sweat out the grime. The room is full of men sitting on benches, chatting, arguing about chariot races or politics, or just sitting in silence, eyes closed, enjoying the warmth. The noise is considerable. Conversations, laughter, arguments, and echoing off the tile and marble surfaces. There's no peaceful spa music, no gentle ambience, just the raw sound of humanity. From the tepidarium, you move to the caldarium, the hot room, where the temperature is almost unbearable. The floor is heated from below by the hypocaust, a system of raised floors with hot air circulating underneath. And if you're not careful, you can actually burn your feet on the tiles. The room is filled with steam from the hot pools, and the air is thick enough to almost chew. Men are red-faced, sweating profusely, and looking either blissful or like they're about to pass out. You lower yourself into the hot pool, and the water is almost scalding, but after the shock passes, it feels incredible. For maybe the first time all day, your muscles begin to relax. The aches from hauling stones ease slightly. The constant tension in your shoulders loosens just a bit. But this is also where you notice the lack of hygiene that makes Roman baths somewhat horrifying by modern standards. The water in these pools is not constantly filtered or changed. It's the same water, reused throughout the day, shared by dozens or hundreds of bodies. People are washing off days of accumulated filth, and all of that is going into the water you're sitting in. There's a film on the surface, a combination of oils, dirt, and human secretions that you try not to think about. Some men are using strigils, curved metal scrapers, to scrape the grime and dead skin off their bodies, and that mixture of oil, sweat, and skin cells is floating in the water around you. Others are relieving themselves in the pool because why get out when you're comfortable? The Romans have public toilets, as we discussed, but not everyone bothers to use them. The sophisticated Romans, the wealthy ones, bring slaves with them to the baths. These slaves carry their masters' bathing supplies, scrape them with strigils, massage them with oils, and generally attend to their comfort. You don't have a slave. You have a small clay bottle of cheap olive oil that you use sparingly, rubbing it on your skin, and then scraping it off with a borrowed strigil that's been used by gods know how many other people. The oil is supposed to carry away the dirt, and it does, sort of, but you're never quite sure if you're getting cleaner or just redistributing different people's filth. After the caldarium, you're supposed to move to the frigidarium, the cold room, with its pool of unheated water. The shock of cold after the intense heat is supposed to be invigorating, closing your pores and toning your skin. You dip in quickly, the cold taking your breath away, and then you're out again, shivering despite the warmth of the room. Some men spend extended time in the cold pool, but you can't stand it. You're cold enough in your unheated apartment, you don't need to pay for the privilege of being cold. Throughout all of this, the social aspect of the baths continues. Men are conducting business, making deals, gossiping about scandals, discussing the latest political developments. The baths are one of the few places where different classes mix, sort of. The wealthy are still in the best spots with their entourages of slaves, and they still look down on you, but at least you're all naked, which provides a small democratizing effect. Although even that's not entirely true, because the wealthy are well fed and muscled from leisure exercise or military training, while you're thin and scarred from labor, your body telling the story of your class status even without clothes. There are also the bath attendants, masseurs who offer their services for an additional fee, food vendors selling snacks, and inevitably, prostitutes. The baths are known locations for prostitution, both male and female. Certain areas are understood to be for those seeking sexual services, and the management looks the other way because it's profitable. You're not interested and couldn't afford it anyway, but it's there, another aspect of Roman life where sex is transactional and ubiquitous. The atmosphere is also medically questionable. Remember, germ theory doesn't exist. Romans have no concept of bacteria or viruses. They think disease is caused by bad air, the miasma theory, or by imbalanced humors in the body. So the idea that sitting in warm, shared water with dozens of other people might be a perfect environment for spreading disease never occurs to them. And diseases do spread. Fungal infections, skin conditions, eye infections, and various other ailments pass freely through the bath population. That rash you see on the man next to you, you'll probably have it in a week. But despite all of this, the discomfort, the questionable hygiene, the noise, the crowding, there's something about the baths that does provide value. For a brief time, you're warm, genuinely warm in a way you never are in your freezing apartment. Your body relaxes. The pain that's your constant companion eases slightly. You're clean, or cleaner at least, than you were. And there's a sense of community, however superficial. You see your neighbors, you hear the news, you feel connected to the larger world of Rome in a way that your isolated apartment doesn't allow. After you've completed the bathing cycle, you return to the apoditerium and are pleasantly surprised to find your clothes still there, though your sandals are gone. Someone has stolen them, and you're now barefoot, which means tomorrow's walk to find work will be even more unpleasant. But that's a tomorrow problem. Right now, you're clean, and you pull on your tunic, still damp because you don't have a towel. Romans use strigils to scrape off water rather than towels to absorb it, and you head back out into the Roman evening. The walk home is different now. The streets are dimming as the sun sets fully. Shopkeepers are closing their establishments, pulling heavy wooden shutters across their fronts and barring them against the night. The criminal element is emerging, and you walk quickly, aware that your barefoot status marks you as particularly vulnerable. Someone who couldn't even keep their sandals at the baths is someone with nothing worth stealing, but also someone who won't be able to run away effectively. You pass a temple, one of the hundreds scattered throughout Rome dedicated to various gods. A few people are making evening offerings, dropping coins into collection boxes or leaving small amounts of food on altars. Religion permeates Roman life in a way that's hard to overstate, and we'll get to that. But for now, you just nod respectfully toward the temple, murmur a quick prayer to whatever deity might be listening, and keep moving. The gods haven't helped much lately, but it doesn't hurt to stay on their good side, just in case. Religion in ancient Rome isn't like modern religion where you go to church once a week, and that's your spiritual obligation fulfilled. In Rome, Religion is everywhere, all the time, woven into every aspect of daily life, and it's less about personal faith and more about contractual obligation. The relationship between Romans and their gods is transactional. You give offerings, perform rituals, show respect, and in return, the gods are supposed to provide favor, protection, and prosperity. Supposed to being the operative phrase, because from your perspective, the gods have been falling down on their end of the bargain. The Roman pantheon is extensive and confusing. There are the major gods, the ones everyone knows: Jupiter, king of the gods; Juno, his wife; Mars, god of war; Venus, goddess of love; Neptune, god of the sea, and many others. But there are also hundreds of minor deities, each with specific functions. There's a god for doorways, Janus; a goddess for the hearth, Vesta; deities for everything from sewing to sewage. And you're expected to honor all of them, or at least the ones relevant to your daily activities, because offending a god, even a minor one, can bring disaster. Beyond the official Roman pantheon, there are foreign gods that have been absorbed into Roman religion. Isis from Egypt, Mithras from Persia, Cybele from Asia Minor. Rome is remarkably tolerant of other religions as long as worshippers also show respect to the Roman gods and, crucially, to the emperor. Emperor worship is mandatory. The emperor is declared divine, either during his lifetime if he's particularly powerful, or definitely after his death if the Senate approves his deification. You're required to make offerings to the emperor's genius, his divine spirit, and refusing to do so is treason, punishable by death. Your relationship with the gods is complicated by poverty. Proper religious observance requires offerings, sacrifices, animals for the important rituals, food, wine, incense, coins, all things you can barely afford. The wealthy can sacrifice bulls, an expensive and impressive offering that surely catches the gods' attention. You sacrifice a chicken if you're lucky, more often just some grain or a bit of wine poured out as a libation. You hope the gods understand your financial constraints and give you credit for intent, but you're not confident. Every major life event is marked by religious ritual. Birth. You make offerings to Juno Lucina, goddess of childbirth, hoping she'll protect your wife and child. Coming of age. Boys dedicate their childhood toys to the household gods and receive their adult toga in a ceremony. Marriage, a whole series of rituals invoking various deities. Death, elaborate funeral rites to ensure the deceased's spirit doesn't become a restless ghost. Miss any of these, perform them incorrectly, or fail to make adequate offerings, and you risk divine punishment, which could mean anything from bad luck to plague to your entire family being cursed. The household gods, the lares and penates, are particularly important. Every home, even your miserable room in the insula, should have a small shrine to these protective spirits. It's called a lararium, and it's where you make daily offerings to keep the household gods happy and your family safe. Your lararium is modest. Just a small niche in the wall with some cheap figurines and a place to burn incense when you can afford it. Every morning, ideally, you're supposed to offer food, wine, and prayers. In reality, when you're choosing between feeding the gods and feeding your children, the children win, and you hope the gods understand. But Romans believe that neglecting the household gods is inviting disaster into your home. Then there are the auguries, the practice of reading divine will through signs and omens. Professional augurs, priests who specialize in this, are consulted for important decisions. They read the flight patterns of birds, examine the entrails of sacrificed animals, interpret thunder and lightning, all to determine what the gods want. But augury isn't just for the elite making state decisions. Common people also look for signs constantly. A bird flying from the left, bad omen. Seeing a snake crossing your path could be good or bad depending on the snake's behavior and which god it might represent. Spilling salt, unlucky. The list of potential omens is endless, and Romans see divine messages everywhere, which creates a constant state of low-level anxiety about whether you've misread a sign and are about to be punished for it. Superstition and religion blur together. You wear amulets, small charms meant to ward off evil. The evil eye is a major concern, the belief that someone can curse you just by looking at you with envy or malice. To protect against this, people wear phallic amulets, the fascinum, because Romans believe the phallus has apotropaic power, meaning it wards off evil. Yes, you wear a tiny bronze penis around your neck for protection, and so does everyone else, including children. It's not sexual, it's religious, a distinction that would seem strange to modern sensibilities but is perfectly normal in Rome. Curse tablets are another aspect of Roman religious life that's particularly dark. These are small sheets of lead inscribed with curses, asking gods or spirits to harm your enemies. They're deposited in graves, wells, or temples, especially temples to underworld deities. The curses can be shockingly specific and vicious. May Marcus suffer from insomnia, may his business fail, may his wife leave him, may his children die. People curse their romantic rivals, business competitors, even the chariot racers they bet against. It's a way of weaponizing religion, and it's completely socially acceptable. You've never made a curse tablet yourself. Lead costs money, and hiring a scribe to inscribe it costs more, but you've thought about it, particularly regarding the landlord who's threatening eviction. Fortune tellers, astrologers, and magicians operate throughout Rome, offering their services for fees. They'll read your future in various ways, interpreting dreams, casting horoscopes, or performing divination rituals. The wealthy consult expensive, well-connected astrologers. You, if you consult anyone, go to the cheap fortune teller in the forum who tells everyone roughly the same thing. You'll have challenges, but also opportunities. Someone close to you can't be trusted, and you should make an offering to such and such deity. It's vague enough to apply to anyone's life, but specific enough that you can't dismiss it entirely. Magic is both feared and sought after. Love potions, protection spells, healing charms, they're all available from practitioners operating in the shadows. The line between religion and magic is thin. Both involve invoking supernatural powers, but magic is more coercive, trying to force gods or spirits to do your will rather than asking respectfully. It's legally questionable, technically illegal if it's meant to harm someone, but widely practiced. You've heard stories of people being poisoned by rivals who hired magicians, or driven mad by curses, or dying mysteriously after offending someone connected to the magical underworld. The major religious festivals provide some relief from the grind of daily life. Rome has dozens of festivals throughout the year, celebrating various gods and historical events. During festivals, there are often free distributions of food and wine, public entertainments, and a general relaxation of social rules. The Saturnalia in December is particularly notable. For a few days, social order is inverted. Slaves are given temporary freedom. Masters serve them meals. Gambling is legal, and people give gifts. It's chaotic and joyous, and it's one of the few times when being poor doesn't feel quite as oppressive because everyone is celebrating together. But religion also reinforces your lowly status. The priests, the flames, the Vestal virgins, the augurs, they're all from wealthy, connected families. Religious authority and political power are intertwined, and you're excluded from both. The major temples are architectural marvels, built with marble and gold, decorated with statues and artwork. And when you enter them, which you rarely do because you feel uncomfortable in such grand spaces, you're reminded of how small you are, how insignificant, how far from divine favor. Temples also serve as banks, safe storage for valuable items, and community centers. The wealthy deposit money in temples for safekeeping. Important documents are stored there. Public meetings and announcements happen on temple steps. But for you, temples are primarily places of obligation, where you occasionally make small offerings and hope it's enough to avoid divine wrath, knowing it probably isn't. There's also the constant fear of prodigies, unnatural events interpreted as signs of divine anger. A comet appears, the gods are angry. An earthquake, divine punishment. A two-headed calf is born, the gods are sending a message, probably a bad one. When prodigies occur, the Senate consults the Sibylline books, ancient prophetic texts, to determine what rituals and sacrifices are needed to appease the gods. Often this means public ceremonies. Sometimes it means scapegoating someone, finding a person or group to blame and punish to satisfy divine anger. You hope you're never the scapegoat. The mystery cults offer an alternative to traditional Roman religion, secret societies dedicated to specific deities with initiation rituals and hidden knowledge. The cult of Mithras, popular among soldiers, meets in underground temples and offers members a sense of brotherhood and spiritual enlightenment. The Eleusinian mysteries, imported from Greece, promise initiates a better afterlife. These cults are appealing because they offer something traditional Roman religion doesn't: personal salvation, a direct relationship with the divine, and hope for something better after death. Traditional Roman religion is very focused on the here and now, the transactional relationship of do ut des. I give so that you give. The mystery cults offer transcendence, but joining a mystery cult requires initiation fees, ongoing contributions, and time for secret meetings and rituals. Resources you don't have. So while you're curious about what these cults offer, you remain on the outside, participating in the public, transactional religion that dominates Roman life, making your small offerings, observing your festivals, wearing your protective amulets, and hoping that's enough to keep the gods from making your already difficult life even worse. Because in Rome, the gods are always watching, always judging, and always ready to punish those who fail in their obligations. And you're failing daily, not through lack of devotion, but through lack of resources. You pray the gods understand the difference. Let's talk about entertainment in Rome, because if there's one thing the empire does well, it's providing spectacles to distract the masses from their miserable lives. Bread and circuses, panem et circenses, is the unofficial policy. Keep the people fed just enough to avoid revolt, and give them entertainment spectacular enough to make them forget their problems. And the entertainment in Rome is nothing if not spectacular, though spectacular doesn't always mean pleasant. The gladiatorial games are the most famous Roman entertainment, and they're exactly as brutal as you've heard. These aren't sporting events in any modern sense. They're blood sport, fights to the death or near death, performed in arenas like the Colosseum, the Flavian Amphitheater, which can hold 50,000 spectators, or in smaller amphitheaters throughout the city and empire. The games are held on special occasions, religious festivals, imperial celebrations, or sometimes just because a wealthy politician wants to curry favor with the people and has money to burn on public spectacles. Getting into the games is theoretically free, at least for the major events sponsored by the emperor or wealthy patrons, but practically complicated. You need a ticket, a tessera, which are distributed beforehand, and there are more people who want tickets than tickets available. So you have to wait in line, sometimes for hours, often overnight, in the hope of getting one. And once you have your ticket, you still have to deal with the crowds, the crush of 50,000 people trying to enter through a limited number of gates, the pushing, the shoving, the occasional trampling death that occurs when crowds panic. If you manage to get inside, your seat is determined by your social class. The arena has a strict seating hierarchy. The emperor and his family sit in the best box, the pulvinar, with a perfect view and comfortable seating. Senators sit in the next best section, the podium, marble seats with cushions brought by their slaves. Then come the equestrians, the wealthy merchant class, in the menianum primum. You, as a member of the poor working class, sit in the menianum secundum, or even the menianum summum in lignes, the upper wooden seats, so far from the arena floor that you can barely see the details of what's happening. Your seat is a wooden bench, cramped, uncomfortable, and if it's a hot day, you're basically sitting in an oven because heat rises and you're at the top. But you're here, and that's what matters. The games are an all-day affair, starting in the morning with the venations, animal hunts. Exotic animals from across the empire, lions, tigers, bears, elephants, rhinoceroses, crocodiles, are brought into the arena and either fight each other or are hunted by trained bestiarii, specialized gladiators who fight animals. The slaughter is immense. Thousands of animals are killed during major games, their blood soaking into the sand that covers the arena floor. The crowds cheer with each kill, the more violent and unusual the better. An elephant going berserk and trampling its handlers before being killed by dozens of spears. Entertainment gold. After the animal hunts come the executions, the meridiani or noontime executions. This is when criminals, prisoners of war, and other condemned individuals are killed in various creative and horrific ways. Some are simply beheaded or crucified, relatively straightforward executions. But others are killed as part of mythological reenactments, tied to stakes and burned alive to represent martyrs, or torn apart by animals while reenacting stories from mythology. A man dressed as Orpheus, torn apart by bears. A woman playing Danae, raped by a giraffe in a grotesque parody of Zeus's visitation. These executions are meant to be both punishment and entertainment, and the crowd's reaction is mixed. Some cheer, some look away, but everyone stays to watch. The main event, what everyone really came for, is the gladiatorial combat in the afternoon. Gladiators are professional fighters, some slaves, some free men who have signed contracts, all trained in specific fighting styles. There's the murmillo, heavily armored with a large shield and sword. The threeks with smaller shields and curved swords. The retiarius armed with a net and trident, wearing minimal armor. The secutor, designed to fight the retiarius. Each matchup is carefully orchestrated to be dramatic, skilled fighters with different styles creating dynamic combat. The fights are brutal but not always to the death, despite popular belief. Gladiators are expensive to train and maintain. Killing them every time they fight would be economically unsustainable. So many fights end with one gladiator yielding, raising a finger to ask for mercy, the missio. The decision of whether to grant mercy rests with the sponsor of the games, who often looks to the crowd for their opinion. The thumbs up, thumbs down thing is actually more complicated. The crowd indicates their preference through shouts and gestures, and the sponsor makes the final call based on how the fight went, whether it was exciting, whether the defeated gladiator fought bravely, and whether killing him would be popular. When a gladiator is killed, his body is dragged off the arena floor through the Porta Libitinensis, the gate of death, and the blood is raked over with fresh sand to prepare for the next bout. The successful gladiator receives a palm frond, symbolizing victory, and possibly prize money if he's particularly impressive. Famous gladiators are celebrities, their names known throughout the empire, their images on lamps and pottery, their fighting styles analyzed and debated. Some women are particularly obsessed with gladiators, and there are rumors, probably true, of wealthy women having affairs with famous fighters, attracted to their physical prowess and danger. But from your seat high in the cheap section, the individual fighters are distant figures, their expressions invisible, their blood just dark patches on the sand. What you experience is the crowd, the collective roar when a particularly good blow is struck, the gasp when someone is injured badly, the chanting for death when a fighter has performed poorly. The atmosphere is electric, charged with bloodlust and excitement, 50,000 people united in their desire for violence. The games serve multiple purposes beyond entertainment. They're political tools, ways for emperors and wealthy patrons to demonstrate power and generosity. They're religious ceremonies, often held as part of festivals honoring gods or deceased emperors. They're social bonding experiences, one of the few times when all classes of Roman society are present in the same space, even if rigidly segregated. And they're psychological releases, a way for people living in overcrowded, stressful conditions to channel their aggression and frustration into watching others suffer. There's also the chariot racing, held in the Circus Maximus, a massive stadium that can hold 150,000 spectators, even larger than the Colosseum. Chariot racing is, if anything, more popular than gladiatorial games, and Romans are fanatically devoted to their teams. There are 4 main factions, the blues, greens, reds, and whites, each with devoted fan bases that border on religious fervor. Riots have occurred over chariot racing. People have been killed in fights between rival fans. The races themselves are dangerous, chariots crashing at high speeds, drivers being thrown and trampled by horses, wheels colliding and splintering. The successful charioteers, like gladiators, become celebrities, earning enormous sums and enjoying fame across the empire. You have your team, everyone does. You're a green supporter, not for any particular reason, just because your father was, and his father before him. When the greens win, you celebrate like it's a personal victory. When they lose, it ruins your day, which is admittedly already not great, but still. You argue with blues supporters, genuine heated arguments over the merits of different drivers and horses, arguments that can escalate into physical fights if enough wine is involved. Theater is another form of entertainment, though less violent. Roman theater includes tragedies and comedies, often adaptations of Greek plays, performed in large open-air theaters. The performances can be crude by modern standards, lots of slapstick, sexual humor, and over-the-top acting to ensure even the people in the farthest seats can follow along. Mimes, a lower form of theater, are particularly popular with common people. These are bawdy, often obscene performances with minimal dialogue, lots of physical comedy, and frequently sexual content. They mock authority, make fun of gods and emperors, just carefully enough not to cross into treasonous territory, and provide a release for social tensions. Street performers are everywhere, providing free entertainment for those who can't afford or can't get tickets to the major venues. Musicians, acrobats, snake charmers, sword swallowers, fire breathers, they all work the crowds in the forum and other public spaces, hoping for a few coins tossed their way. You've watched these performers many times, standing in the back of the crowd, enjoying the show without paying because you can't pay. And while the performers probably notice freeloaders like you, they tolerate it because a crowd is a crowd, and a large crowd attracts paying customers. Gambling is officially illegal, except during Saturnalia, but that doesn't stop anyone. Romans gamble on everything: dice games, knucklebones, board games, chariot races, gladiatorial outcomes, even street fights. You've lost more money than you should have on dice games, playing in back alleys with other desperate men, hoping for a lucky roll that could change your fortunes, usually just making your situation worse. The dice are often weighted or loaded, but everyone uses them anyway because everyone's cheating, so it's a level playing field of dishonesty. All of this entertainment, the games, the races, the theater, the gambling, the drinking, the sex, it's designed to provide just enough pleasure and distraction to make life bearable. Juvenal, a Roman satirist, coined the phrase bread and circuses as a criticism, arguing that Romans had given up their political freedom in exchange for free grain and entertainment. And he's not wrong. As long as you're fed just enough to not starve and entertained just enough to not revolt, you tolerate your powerlessness, your poverty, your complete lack of control over your own life. The emperors and the elite know this. They use entertainment as a tool of control, and it works. After a day at the games, watching gladiators fight and animals slaughter each other, you go back to your tiny room feeling like you've participated in something grand, something important. You forget, temporarily, that you're one illness away from destitution. The system perpetuates itself, and you're complicit in it, and you know it, but what else can you do? Not attending the games won't change anything. So you go, you cheer, you get caught up in the spectacle, and you go home, and nothing has changed except you've lost a day of potential work, and you're no closer to escaping the trap of poverty that Rome has built around people like you. Let's talk about the one certainty in Roman life, the one thing that unites emperor and slave, senator and beggar: death. And in ancient Rome, death is everywhere, constant, casual, and often early. If you think life expectancy of 30 to 40 years sounds bad, remember that's an average, heavily skewed by infant mortality. If you survive childhood, you might live into your 50s or 60s, but that's still far shorter than modern lifespans, and those extra years are usually accompanied by chronic pain, disability, and disease. Childhood is the most dangerous time. As we mentioned, roughly half of all children born in Rome die before age 5. The causes are numerous: disease, malnutrition, accidents, exposure if the infant is unwanted and left out to die, which is legal and not uncommon. Infant mortality is so expected that parents often don't become emotionally attached to very young children, knowing the odds are against their survival. Children aren't even formally named or fully welcomed into the family until they're several days old, after they've proven they can survive the immediate post-birth period. Diseases that are preventable or easily treatable in the modern world are death sentences in Rome. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, dysentery, typhoid, malaria, they sweep through the crowded, unsanitary city regularly. Plague, though the Great Plagues are still in Rome's future during the time we're visiting, can devastate entire neighborhoods. When disease strikes, there's little that can be done. Doctors, as we discussed, have limited effectiveness, their treatments often based on incorrect theories, and sometimes making things worse. Prayers and offerings to Asclepius, the healing god, are your best hope, and hope is not an effective treatment. Your son, the one who was feverish earlier, might recover. Children are resilient, and minor illnesses often pass. But if his condition worsens, if the fever doesn't break, if the cough develops into pneumonia, you'll watch him die, helpless to do anything substantive. You'll hold him, wipe his forehead with cool water, whisper prayers, and eventually accept that he's gone. Then you'll have to figure out how to bury him, because funerals cost money and you barely have enough for the living, let alone the dead. Funerals in Rome are important, governed by tradition and religious obligation. The deceased needs to be properly buried or cremated to ensure their spirit doesn't become a wandering ghost. For the wealthy, funerals are elaborate events with professional mourners, musicians, actors wearing masks of ancestors, and grand processions through the streets. The body is cremated on an expensive pyre of fragrant woods, and the ashes are placed in an ornate urn in the family tomb. Your funeral options are significantly more limited. The very poor, those who die with no family and no money, are dumped in mass graves outside the city, piled together with other unclaimed bodies, maybe covered with quicklime to speed decomposition and reduce smell. If you have family and they have any resources at all, they'll try to avoid this fate for you, saving up for a burial club, a collegia, which pools money from members to ensure everyone gets at least a basic funeral. You pay small regular contributions, and when you die, the club provides a simple cremation or burial. It's not dignified by wealthy standards, but it's better than the mass grave. The location of burial is also regulated by law. Romans are not allowed to bury their dead within the city walls, a sensible public health measure given the population density. So the roads leading out of Rome are lined with tombs, a mix of grand mausoleums for the wealthy and simple markers for the poor. Walking these roads is like walking through a city of the dead, and the tombs often have inscriptions asking passers-by to remember the deceased, to pour a libation, to acknowledge that they existed. Death comes in many forms beyond disease. Accidents are common. Construction accidents, as we discussed, happen constantly. Falls from those dangerous stairs in your insula into the street from scaffolding. Fires, which can consume entire apartment blocks, burning alive anyone too slow or too trapped to escape. The vigiles try to fight fires, but their equipment is primitive, buckets and hand pumps, and by the time they arrive, often the best they can do is try to stop the spread to neighboring buildings. Violence, both criminal and state-sanctioned, kills many Romans. Murder rates are high. Street crime, domestic violence, drunken brawls, escalated arguments all result in deaths that are barely investigated unless the victim is someone of importance. Execution is a common punishment for a wide range of crimes. Crucifixion for slaves and rebels, beheading for citizens convicted of serious crimes, burning alive for arsonists, being thrown to wild animals in the arena for various offenses. The Roman state is not shy about killing people to maintain order. Suicide is also common and not particularly stigmatized, at least not in the same way it is in later Christian-influenced societies. Romans view suicide as a rational choice in certain circumstances, a way to preserve honor, avoid torture or execution, or escape unbearable suffering. Famous Stoic philosophers advocate for suicide as a dignified exit when life becomes unlivable. For the desperately poor, suicide is sometimes seen as preferable to slow starvation or watching your family suffer. Methods vary: hanging, jumping from heights, poison if you can obtain it, or simply stopping eating and drinking until death comes. War claims lives constantly. Even during periods of relative peace, the legions are fighting somewhere on the frontiers in Britannia, Germania, Parthia, North Africa. Young men are conscripted or volunteer, lured by promises of regular pay, land grants after service, and glory. Many never return. They die in battle, from infected wounds, from disease in military camps, or simply disappear into the vast empire, presumed dead when they stop sending letters home. Childbirth, as we discussed, is one of the leading causes of death for women. Every pregnancy is a risk, and women who survive multiple childbirths are fortunate. The maternal mortality rate is staggering by modern standards. Hemorrhaging, infection, obstructed labor with no surgical intervention all can kill mother and child. Midwives do their best, but without understanding of germ theory or access to proper medical tools, their best is often not good enough. Old age, when it comes, is not gentle. Romans don't have the medical interventions that ease the pain of aging. Arthritis, cataracts, hearing loss, tooth decay, chronic pain from old injuries, these accumulate until daily life becomes a trial. The wealthy can afford to retire, to rest, to have slaves care for them. The poor work until their bodies literally cannot continue, and then they become dependent on family charity, if their family can afford it, or they become beggars, or they simply die quietly of neglect and malnutrition. The Roman understanding of the afterlife is vague and not particularly comforting. They believe in the underworld, ruled by Pluto or Dispater, where shades of the dead exist in a gray, joyless eternity. It's not punishment exactly, unless you were particularly evil and ended up in Tartarus, but it's not pleasant either. Just endless existence without purpose or pleasure. The mystery cults offer better afterlife options, rebirth, paradise, union with the divine, but those require initiation and belief systems you haven't fully engaged with. What this means is that for most Romans, this life is all there is. There's no promise of heaven, no eternal reward for suffering through mortal hardships. This life, with its poverty and pain and brief moments of joy, is it? And then you die and you're forgotten. Your name may be remembered for a generation or two if you're lucky, and then lost completely. You'll leave behind no great works, no monuments, no written records. Your entire existence will vanish as if you never were, just another forgotten Roman who lived and died in obscurity. But here, at the end of this very long day in ancient Rome, having experienced everything from morning's awakening to the night's dangers, having navigated the social hierarchy, the violence, the entertainment, the religion, the poverty, what can we conclude? You've survived this one day. Congratulations. But could you survive another? And another? Could you survive years of this? Decades? The honest answer is probably not. Not because you're weak or incapable, but because ancient Rome is designed, perhaps not intentionally but functionally, to consume people like you. The system needs a constant supply of labor, soldiers, workers, people to build the monuments and fight the wars and grow the food that keeps the empire running. And it gets that labor by creating conditions where most people have no choice but to work themselves to death just to survive. The Rome we remember, the Rome of history books and movies, is the Rome of emperors and senators, of military victories and architectural achievements, of philosophy and literature. But that Rome was built on the backs of millions of people like you, people whose names we'll never know, whose stories were never recorded, who lived short, hard lives and received almost nothing in return except the privilege of continuing to exist for one more day. And yet, despite everything, people endured. They found love in impossible circumstances. They raised children against all odds. They took pride in their work, even when that work was backbreaking and unappreciated. They gathered with friends over cheap wine and laughed at crude jokes. They cheered for their chariot racing teams with genuine passion. They made offerings to gods who mostly ignored them, hoping for better fortune. They were human, fully human, with all the complexity and resilience and capacity for joy that implies. So tonight, as you settle into whatever comfort you have, Whether it's a bed or a couch or just a quiet moment of peace, think about those millions of forgotten Romans. Think about their struggles and their small triumphs. Think about how lucky you are, how incredibly, impossibly lucky to live in a time when survival is not your constant preoccupation. When you're sick, you can see a doctor who actually understands medicine. When you're injured, there are painkillers, antibiotics, surgery with anesthesia. When you're hungry, food is accessible, not always easy, but not the constant, desperate struggle it was in Rome. You have clean water at the turn of a tap. You have light at the flip of a switch. You have heating and cooling. You have legal protections, limited though they may sometimes feel, that would astonish an ancient Roman. You can choose your work, mostly, choose your partner, choose how to live your life. These are freedoms and privileges that the vast majority of humans throughout history never had. Would you have lasted a day in ancient Rome? Maybe. People are adaptable, and you might surprise yourself. But would you have wanted to? Would you choose to live that life if you had any alternative? The answer, almost certainly, is no. And the fact that you don't have to, that you were born into a world with modern medicine and human rights and relative peace and abundance, is a gift. A gift purchased, in part, by the suffering of those millions of ancient Romans who had no choice but to endure. So remember them. Not the emperors and generals, we remember those already. Remember the builders and the bakers, the mothers and the laborers, the people who woke up every day in terrible circumstances and chose to keep going because that's what humans do. We endure. We persist. We find meaning in the smallest things and hold on to hope even when hope seems irrational. The past is past and we can't change it. But we can learn from it. We can appreciate what we have. We can work to ensure that our world, with all its problems, continues to be better than what came before. And we can acknowledge that our comfort, our opportunities, our very survival, stand on foundations built by people who suffered so we wouldn't have to. Rest well tonight, knowing that you live in an age of miracles that ancient Romans couldn't imagine. And maybe, just maybe, say a quiet thank you to those forgotten millions who endured Rome so that, eventually, their distant descendants might live in something better. Good night.